the great conservative movement of America and of our time. A brush fire of freedom that's being lit all over this country. We, as an irate, tireless American populace, will overcome the few radical leftists that control the levers of power today. Joe Biden's failed economic policies has given us inflation like you can't believe, and the border is in disarray.
It's amazing how few of the people commenting on this have actually bothered to go see what's happening. Well, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona actually went to the border.
Biggs, where's Andy? Boy, oh boy, Andy. There's a guy. He's tough.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Biggs, Congressman from Arizona's 5th Congressional District. Thanks for joining me on another one of my semi-regular podcasts, What's the Biggs Idea? I've been down to the border a couple times in the last few weeks. I've been to the border with my guest today. He's an expert on immigration issues, does a great job. Center for Immigration Studies. I'm sure what your official title is, but I've got Mr. Todd Bensman with me. Todd, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here again. Thank you. I've been on this show a few times now.
Yes, you have. And the reason I love having you on is because I consider you to be one of the experts on the border. You go down to the border and you write, you study, you know all things about this. And just a little context of this. When I was down in Eagle Pass, I told the Speaker of the House, he's taken 60 members down. I said, you're not going to see anything. I'm going to take a few with me the day before because we're more likely to see something before they get it all cleaned up for you. And of course, that was the case. I took 4 other members with me, and we went and we saw people crossing the river in Eagle Pass. But they had literally, Todd, cleaned out over 12,000 people from under the port of entry bridge there at Eagle Pass in 24 hours because they wanted it all cleaned up before members of Congress got down there and saw how difficult it is. So, Todd, just briefly, give us the where you've been lately on the border. What you have observed?
Right. Well, I just pinned a piece for the New York Post, a couple, not the one we're going to talk about in a minute, but just a few days earlier, establishing that the huge numbers that we were seeing crossing all through October, November, December, 12,000, 14,000 a day, well outside anything in the American experience, is down all of a sudden by more than half those numbers coming across. And I asked, why would that be? What's happening? What new and different is happening at the border? And what's actually happening in the piece that I wrote for the Post explains all of this. Is you remember that Joe Biden decided in right around Christmas time to go down there with Antony Blinken to meet with the president of Mexico, and then 5 days later, Mayorkas, the DHS secretary, and Blinken went down and met again. And that's right at that moment, very neatly coinciding, Mexican troops began rounding up thousands and thousands of immigrants from the area right across from Eagle Pass, and actually from Tijuana all the way to Matamoros, operations to fill buses and airplanes and fly them to the south of Mexico and create a kind of a Gaza Strip down there, blocking them in there to kind of keep them from rushing forward. Those giant numbers and the media, the video footage of those giant numbers were kind of fueling these negative polls against the Biden campaign, is really what it boils down to. So right now, for the moment, the Mexicans are involved in deporting, I don't know if it's deportation, but moving thousands and thousands south. And they also finally shut down those trains. I wrote about those trains, the freight trains moving up. They blocked all the freight yards. They're pulling them off the trains when they can. and really kind of just to slow the flow down. They've asked the Biden administration for $20 billion with a B. We don't know whether any money has changed hands for this. Certainly, the Mexicans have experienced a dramatic change of heart. That's the situation right now at the border, but it's still 5, 6, and 7,000 a day, even at that, which is just catastrophic numbers. So our northern cities, Sky Harbor Airport, all the airports in the Southwest are still just jam-packed because those numbers, even at 50 and 60% less than they were just a month ago, are still unbelievably high.
Yeah, and Todd, just 2 quick points to that. Just talking to, you fly a lot, I fly a lot. I fly around the Southwest because I go to the border. You can't get on a flight without seeing a cadre of folks who have come across the border, and they're on the same flight wherever you're going, with DC, Houston, Chicago, whatever it may be, they will be on them. The other thing too is, and it gets to a point you just made, and I think it's so critical. I agree with you. My observation was, my prediction was that when Blinken and Mayorkas went down for that follow-up meeting, you would see action, and it would be done not for permanent action, but for political purposes. And quite frankly, I don't care whether it's political purposes or whatnot, just to slow down the flow. But when you slow it down to 180,000 a month from 300,000 plus a month, 150 to 180, because that's really where you're sitting right now, that is still catastrophic. I mean, Jay Johnson, when he was DHS secretary, said, look, if we have 1,000 a day, it is a crisis on our border. And the other, in connection with that, while they've kind of slowed it down everywhere else, Lukeville's still getting an incredible amount, far more than they can handle every day in the Tucson sector. So, yeah, I agree with you. That's what I'm seeing taking place there, and this is something that they could have done. They could have done it 3 years ago, right, Todd?
I mean, if this shows us nothing else, it's that when the Mexicans want to help us out, when they want to do a solid for America on this issue, they certainly can. All they have to do is they have to be made to want to do it. It's not organically in their self-interest to block and stop tens of thousands of illegal immigrants who don't want to stay in Mexico. And make them stay in Mexico. They have to be made to want that. It's a big mystery still what the Biden administration said or did or promised to make them want, but it's a good chance that it would have been carrots and not sticks. And carrots don't last long. They digest quickly, but sticks are a permanent feature, as we saw when President Trump was in office. And he told the Mexicans, if you don't take back all these immigrants and slow it down on your southern border, we're going to do progressive trade tariffs of up to 28% that will destroy your whole economy. And they believe that and did what he asked.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And here's one of the reasons that in Mexico the carrots don't work, and that is because the cartels, they actually control governments in states and municipalities. And AMLO said he's comfortable working with the cartels. So if he's getting money from us, which we don't know because they haven't released the transcripts of those meetings, so we don't know simply what went on there. But if there's a promise of money, if there's money coming to Mexico, you can be sure that the cartels are going to get some kind of percentage of that, because they make money when they're flowing people at 8, 10, 12,000 people a day across the border as well.
Well, the cartels definitely have gigantic bank accounts that they can live on through November if they had to. I mean,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Very well. But also, once Mexico cashes our humanitarian aid checks or security checks or whatever form of aid we've given them, their incentive to keep doing things for us suddenly dries up. So it'll be interesting to see if the Mexicans can hold that line down there all the way through November. What tends to happen is that the immigrants that are stuck down in Tapachula, you got to apply for Mexican asylum and it takes 6 months. They start to riot. They take over government buildings. They're burning tires. They're smashing windows. They're forming caravans and trying to force their way through the roadblocks and all of that kind of thing. Unrest makes for a pretty bad domestic political situation for the Mexicans. So, are they going to actually hold them back is the question once the checks are cashed.
So speaking of checks, cash, incentives, money, you've been on top of this particular issue that we're going to talk about for years now. And I have agreed with you. It's been my observation as well that the United Nations was actually providing funding and facilitating the movement of people illegally to cross our borders. So they were giving illegal aliens, migrants coming up money. And the reason that everybody needs to understand this too, it also goes with this notion that we're funding the UN. Money is fungible, which means that we're probably funding, there's US dollars for sure going here. You just published something in the New York Post 2 days ago. The UN is paying illegals using US taxpayer cash. Elaborate on that for a second, will you?
Right. Well, the first time I saw this was about 3 years ago. I was down in Reynosa at a camp, an establishment migrant camp on the other side. And I saw them handing out debit cards to the immigrants. IOM representatives were handing these cards out, and right in front of me, I took photos and video and tweeted.
When you say IOM, for people who don't know what that is, that's a UN.
It's a UN.
Yeah, go ahead.
International Organization for Migration, IOM, a huge agency, handing out these cards. And at that time, it was the immigrants that were receiving the cards told me it was $400 every 2 weeks, just a little under $398 or something every 2 weeks. And so $800 a month. Now, it's not like that everywhere. I was supposedly fact checked into oblivion on that, like that it wasn't true, but there it was right in front of me. And then I was able to find all the UN documents online showing what this is called a cash-based intervention program. And now the 2024 budget for this has been published and it's online. It's a UN budget calling for $1.6 billion in aid to 3 million immigrants on the move in 17 countries of Latin America and Mexico and the Caribbean. 329 million of that goes out in cash-based intervention money. That means the debit cards. That means cash in envelopes. It means in-kind, vouchers for hotels and transportation and clothing and food, and really all of the needs at way stations all along the migration trails from South America straight up to our border. The document is calling for example, $25 million in what they call humanitarian transportation. And then further in the document, you can see what that is. It's to help people who are moving onward toward the U.S. border illegally through countries that they are not authorized to enter. Helps them transport them and their families and whoever else right through, as well as money for shelter and rent assistance, food, clothing, personal sanitation of everything you want, deodorant, female products, you name it, millions of dollars for all of that. Immigrants who are traveling to the U.S. border, millions of them, will go for want of anything to maintain themselves and to be able to stay on the trail and stay moving. One important, yeah.
So, first of all, what's the total amount of money, and what is this document that was published? Give us the citation for that, so anybody wanting to get a hold of that can actually get a hold of that.
It's called the Regional Refugee Migrant Response Plan, RMRP for short, and it's the 2024 update. They had a 2023-2024 plan that I wrote about a year ago, but the 2024 numbers shot skyward, and so they had to reassess and reevaluate. They're using 248 NGOs to help deliver this assistance and 15 UN agencies. The UN agencies will hand out 1.2 billion of the 1.6 billion, and the NGOs will hand out the rest of it, will deliver the rest of it. So, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in the hands of NGOs that have signed up for this. There are 20 more NGOs signed up for 2024 than last year because of the incredible demand for all of these goods and services. The piece that I wrote for and published at CIS.org has links to the names of all of those NGOs. If you want to go through, you just have to look in my piece at CIS.org and you'll find the link to the list of the 240 plus NGOs and a very handy tool that's interactive where you can go in, and I've given you a link for this, and you can look up whichever one you want and see what they're up to, what they're doing, and in which countries. You can really, nobody's hiding this. It's like hidden in plain sight. You can try to fact check me again, but don't fact check me. Fact check the UN's document that's online for everybody to see there. It's not fully funded. They are seeking to, I think right now they're looking for small donor donations around. They've got a campaign to raise donations, but the UN gets the bulk of its money, its annual budget from the United States, and has ever since its creation in the post-World War II years.
So, I that is really troubling. I think people would be astounded. I had a briefing, I want to say now, probably it was in December, so probably 3-4 weeks ago now, where we were told that the money that went to, not necessarily the direct money, but Iran was funding and financing Muslim Brotherhood, who was recruiting individuals in Northern Africa and Eastern Africa to recruit and send them to the U.S. Additionally, the idea was that the UN and the International Office of Migration was actually suggesting that people come to the U.S. rather than to Europe. Why? Because it was easier to actually immigrate into the U.S. illegally than it would be to immigrate into Europe illegally. And so this is kind of consistent with that. And when I talk to these illegal aliens and ask them where they're from, how they get here, and I ask them always, why the U.S.? I mean, especially since you got a lot of people from Northern Africa and the Mideast. I say, why are you in Lukeville, Arizona, or Eagle Pass, Texas, for Pete's sakes? They will say, we were told that it's easier to enter the U.S., and they're right. They're right. It's absolutely so much easier to enter the U.S. And before I get to the next topic, I just got to say this. I don't know if you saw this, but France even has changed their laws, and Macron, not Macron, but they signed, the French president signed these laws into place that make it harsher to illegally immigrate into France, and that's because they're experiencing something that we're experiencing something like as well. I want to get to this other thing before we run out of time, and that is, I was just down in Eagle Pass, and I related to that what was down there. The other thing I'll add is you had the containers that had been placed there by Texas, right there by the golf course at Eagle Pass, which is a public golf course that sits right on the river. And then they have the concertina wire, and it goes all the way from the boat ramp, the launching ramp, all the way down till you get to the feds actually take over a mile or two down, heading the other direction. So my question for you is, we had a case come out of that was filed. It's been, again, this is another temporary ruling out of the U.S. Supreme Court, dealing with a ruling out of the Fifth Circuit, dealing with a previous ruling regarding who can put up the concertina wire and how do you deal with that. So do you want to talk a little bit about that for a second, Todd?
Right now, judging by the Supreme Court ruling, the feds have the right to go in there and just tear up all that concertina wire and pull up the stakes and get rid of everything. I don't think they're going to do that. I think right now, some of us are just watching to see if they're actually going to do that. But the optics of Border Patrol removing barriers to illegal immigration during an election year like this, at a moment when all of the polling is showing overwhelmingly that the American people hate this, cannot stand what's going on down there, I think is something that will influence whether you actually see any Border Patrol pulling up barbed wire or pulling up any stakes. So I don't think it's going to happen. And if they do, Greg Abbott is just saying we're going to just put it back up, and it's going to become one of those. So I don't think anything's going to happen. I've talked to some state officials who are in the know as well, and they're also kind of betting that Border Patrol is not going to go in there at this point in time and get caught on film doing that. And then, like, as immigrants come rushing in again. So,
yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, my reading of what the U.S. Supreme Court said is, yeah, CBP has the right to take it down. The federal government has the right to take it down. Could be any agency within the federal government, but that there's nothing prohibiting the state from rolling it back out. And so I'm kind of more like where you are. I see kind of a stasis going on here. The fact that DHS sent another letter today to Governor Abbott of Texas saying, look, we demand that you take it down and you give us back control of the park. Now, what's interesting about the park is that was a public park in control of the mayor, and the mayor basically said, we're going to declare an emergency, inconsistent with the Texas emergency, and what you have now is another standoff going on. So we'll see how that plays out. In the meantime, you look around, and Lukeville continues to draw tons of people. So last time I was there, I'll relate this to you as we wind down the time on this. But when we were there last, we drove literally for miles and didn't see an agent on the border. Why? Because they were at the processing center that we had visited with them. And so the next thing is we happened to run into the contractor, former CBP guy who is retired. He's now in charge of rebuilding and repairing the fences along there. And they'd already repaired 6 places on the fence that had been cut that morning. And that's where everybody's coming through. They're cutting them because down by Lukeville, a lot of folks may not realize it, but the Lukeville port of entry is the one you go through when you're heading down to Rocky Point from Phoenix or Tucson. You head through Ajo and then head on over down to Rocky Point. It sits right along that highway in Mexico. And so it's so easy to bring vehicles up, run a quick cutter through the fence, pull it down, start sending people through, especially since we don't have anybody patrolling. And it's one of the crazy things that you see down there when you go, where we saw the facility was full. We go down there, there's just a family. There's about five or six people sitting there waiting. And we said, well, how'd you get in? Oh, we came in about we walked about an hour after we came in down this way, which is east from where we were. And so we said, okay, well, we're going to drive east, see if we can see that hole. And we run into this guy, and then we stop, and we're just kind of standing there. And sure enough, here comes a group of 20. After them, another group of 25 or 30. Then, it was just steady through. And this is what you see on the border. And people have a hard time believing that's really it. But our patrols, our Border Patrol agents are working their tails off down there. And it's a big area. It's wide open. And a lot of them are reduced to transporting and taken care of. So good on the agents for wanting to do their job and doing their best. And hopefully we can get some policy and enforcement provisions that will allow them to successfully guard our border.
Right. Well, remember that they are under orders when they come in contact with immigrants who have just crossed illegally to process them into the country as quickly as possible. And so for the first time, I think in American history, I'm pretty sure that we've never had this before, that at least 85% of everybody who reaches that border is processed into the country. And that's from Mayorkas, said that he believes more than 85%. I personally believe that it's closer to 100%. I think everybody who comes up to that border is processed right in through the turnstile into the country now. So all of those throngs and thousands of people that you're seeing on the when you do see that, they are all getting in. Virtually nobody is deported and nobody is pushed back. Everybody pretty much gets in. It's maybe in the high 90 percentile. So if it weren't for whatever Mexico is doing for the time being, we would still be at 15,000, 20,000 a day maybe by now. The intelligence community, remember last year, estimated that when Title 42 went away, we would have 18,000 a day. That's what we would have if they hadn't cut this deal with Mexico. And we may have that again if Mexico decides that they just something pissed them off and they're ready to pull back the troops.
Yeah, it's our partnership with Mexico on this issue is tenuous at best sometimes.
They're in the driver's seat. They're in the driver's seat.
They really could be helpful to us or not. So, well, Todd, thanks for all the information you gave us today. It was a pleasure having you on. Good to see you again. I'm sure I'll see you on the border sometime because I know you're down there a lot. I'm down there a lot. I'll be down there again tomorrow. But I wish you well and Godspeed. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll bring you more information next time on what's